welcome to episode number 3 of Arring It Out. I am your host, Jamie Arrington. I appreciate the response on last week's show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. That was the episode with my friend Shane Sharp. He was the mascot at the University of Alabama in the late 90s. Had some amazing stories. If you haven't listened to that, go back and check it out. But I was listening to it and I started thinking, man, we were psychopaths back in the day. Some of the stuff that we did, some of the stuff he did, he maybe took it a little further than I took it. But, crashing a live WCW Thunder on TBS, just like while it's going on, just running into the ring. Yeah. You're not going to see college mascots doing that kind of stuff these days. He was one of a kind. But like last week, we're going to take this episode in a completely different direction as the week before. We're going to talk to a comedian today. Great guy, great friend, great comedian, incredible comedian. If he's in your town, go check him out by all means. I know I say that during the episode, but seriously, he's amazing. You may have seen him on Chelsea Lately. You may have seen him on After Lately. He was the host of Anarchy Afterward, the after show for the Sons of Anarchy. Please welcome my guest today, Chris Franjola. We are here with comedian Chris Franjola. How's it going today, Chris?
Very well, Jamie. Thank you.
I got to say this before we really get started. Book a lot of comedians. I've worked with a lot of comedians that have come through Mississippi in the South region, and we booked you last year to come to Hattiesburg. I think it was on a Tuesday or Wednesday night. And
something like that, yeah.
Something like that. I never know what to expect when a comedian comes to town. I never know, unless you see them in person, you never know what you were going to get. But you showed up and just straight up murdered it. We had a lot of great comedians come through here last year, and as far as just getting on stage and slaughtering it, I mean, you were on another level, my friend. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, I had a blast. That was a lot of fun for me. I don't normally do shows like that, but it takes me back to my roots, the early days of performing in places like that but I love it. It was a great time, and I appreciate you having me up. Yeah, I really had a good time.
So if Chris is in your area, I highly recommend going and checking out one of his shows. Really just great stuff.
Thank you, Jamie. That's nice to hear, because I really do pride myself on my live show. A lot of people know me from TV and whatever else they know me from, and that's one thing. But my live show is a lot of fun, so I try to reiterate that to people. But yeah, so when they do come out, I promise it's always a good time.
Oh, absolutely, and I will co-sign on that. Definitely a great time.
Thank you. You
were born and raised on Long Island.
Yes, I was. Yeah, Ronkonkoma, exit 59 in the LA. It's out there. It's kind of right in the middle, actually. A lot of people will say, oh, Long Island, that must be the Hamptons. Oh, no. Far from it, actually. So, kind of right in the center in between New York and I guess the Hamptons.
Is this kind of like what?
But a good spot to grow up.
Yes. Well, you're not, I guess you wouldn't be the places that Billy Joel would sing about. That sounds a little more.
Yeah. Billy Joel is like for us, for Long Islanders. He becomes more and more like as he gets older. Like I don't even think he leaves Long Island anymore. But so he's like a god to us. So he's whatever Springsteen is to Jersey and whoever is to someplace. I mean, he is our guy. You can't speak ill of him if you're from Long Island. We just love him.
When you were growing up, what kind of sports did you play? You kind of have like an athletic build. Did you play any sports when you were coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I was a huge baseball fan, and I played a lot. I played a lot of just like we called it sandlot, and I guess they still do. We just played pickup games like constantly. That's all we ever did was just get games going. A lot of times it had to be half field for whatever reason because you couldn't get. Baseball is a weird thing because you have to, if you want to play a real game, you have to get 18 people, and that's tough to do. So we would get, I don't know if people did this, we would get, half field. You have 5-on-5 and you have, 2 outfielders, 2 infielders, a pitcher, and that was about it. And we would do that every day in the summer, from the moment we left school to the moment we went back. We would play every single day. All that kind of stuff, pick up football, pick up all that. I wish I was great. I'm a good athlete. I'm not a great athlete. I have friends who could just pick up any sport and they're good. I'm good with a little. I'm good, just never been great.
Well, on last week's episode, I was discussing this with another colleague of mine, a former college mascot, and a lot of times when you have people that are into sports but might not necessarily have the ability to compete at certain levels, you take it in a different direction, and you actually did the same thing. You were a high school mascot for a little while.
I was. I went to Connecticut High School on Long Island, still there. Great school, actually. And I was the T-Bird. That was our mascot, was the T-Bird, which basically looked kind of like it was a chicken, more or less. You know, kind of like a paper machine. I forget what I don't even know what the head's made of. Probably now, looking back on it, probably some poisonous fiberglass or something loaded with asbestos that I would put right on my face. And then, like a big red, almost type, kind of a chicken suit. And somebody asked me to do it because I was like a theater performer. I was, in the school plays and stuff. So I guess they thought that would be a perfect guy to do it. And I did it a few times, and it just was, I don't know, it wasn't getting me. I thought it would be like, I wasn't on the football team, so maybe like being a mascot would be the similar type of situation, but it never really panned out. I remember one time one of the cheerleaders like looking into the snout or whatever, the beak, I guess it was, of the thing and saying, "Who's in there?" And I was like, "Oh, it's me, Chris Franjola." And she's like, "Who?" So she had no idea who I was, and the only reason I was in the costume was trying to impress her, and she moved right on.
And there was kind of an evolution too about the whole craft of being a mascot. It's gotten more and more, I don't want to say glamorous, but it's gotten more. You get more publicity now than you might have gotten back then, and you can't get away with as much now. But it's kind of like, well, if it doesn't serve any purpose, you're just out here getting hot and sweaty and nasty, and
right. And I think like sport. I mean, when high school sports was a big deal where I was from. It's not as big as it probably is where you guys are from and stuff, but I believe it's all gotten so much bigger. I think sports in general has just gotten bigger. And I think where I'm from now, I just went back recently just to kind of look around the campus and the football field when I was there was, some grass and not great. It looks like a real stadium now. It's unbelievable. They have AstroTurf and it's crazy. So I feel like everything has just gotten amped up and much better. So yeah, I'm sure mascotism, if that's even the word, is probably the same way. Everybody's into it now.
How did you get into comedy?
Man, I just, I always was into it, and I kind of did it quietly. It's funny these days, everybody's got an open mic guy, and everybody's talking about their open mics, but I just kind of did it on the down low, kind of. I was working as an electrician in New York City. Fine gig. I liked the job. And at night I would kind of just go do it and tell no one, just for myself, just because I always was into, stand up. I didn't even know really what it was. I just enjoyed listening to all those records and things like that. So I would start doing that, back in, God, when was that? Like the 80s. And that was it. And then I started to become good. At that point, I guess good-ish. Looking back on it, it was probably horrible, but I was as good as an open micer could be. And from that, I started to get more and more, come do this show, come do that show. So that's kind of how it started.
What was it like? I mean, I know that comedy goes through different ebbs and flows, and, I know the late 80s kind of was a boom, and then it kind of fizzled out for a while. What was it like coming up in New York during that time?
It was good. It did ebb and flow, and I believe that there was a lot, at that time they were handing out, the best example of that is like a Brett Butler. Brett Butler had a sitcom, and she probably had 10 good minutes of comedy, and it was like they were just handing out sitcoms to everybody. And I think that's what killed it. There was all these shows, Evening at the Improv and all that. And I don't think any of these people, I think comedy, as you book some top, some really good guys at your stuff. So there are guys who are great. And now, it's just the kind of comedy I like these days, like the Kyle Kinanes and the Tom Segura's and, more conversational kind of stuff. And, I think in the 80s, there was some great people too, but there was a lot of bad people who got a lot of opportunities because there was just not a lot. It was a boom. And I think that ruined it. I think if you watch, like, even at the Improv and you saw 10 guys, you'd be like, these people are terrible. And people would go to shows and think it was probably terrible. And I don't know. And it died. But yeah, it was a good time. There was a lot of bad people doing it. And I think these days those people get weeded out a lot quicker, thankfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you've had a boom in the past few years, but I think can be attributed more to the internet than anything else. Just people having the access to see good comics.
I think so. Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, I think people are more into it for that reason. And, I think people are going out more to live shows. If I'm big on, you run shows, so it's got to be not too long. Like, there was a time where they were just killing you with 3-hour shows. You'd go to any comedy club and it would be like, we're putting up 10 comics tonight for 4 hours. And I never knew who that served. I'm like, who is that serving? The comic, the audience? Nobody wants to watch 5 hours of comedy, especially when most of them are bad. And so now, you give them a good quality show and 90 minutes to 2 hours, and I think people want to come back to stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And
yeah,
not too much on the front end either. That's kind of what I've figured out is you got to keep that,
tight. One of my biggest pet, and I hate to say anything because I like to give everyone a shot at, going up. But there are times, man, where I did shows in Vegas this weekend, and I saw the show. I had to go, I was the headliner. You're the only one who gets screwed by a show that's really long up front. These other guys do that 10 minutes and they get to go home and you get a hot crowd and all that. I was doing, I'm getting up at midnight and, the show's already been 45 minutes and I haven't been up yet. So I'm just like, you got to cut some of these people or something, man. You can't be doing that. Yeah. So I'm a firm believer on not too much up front.
Now, changing gears a little bit, you mentioned you were a baseball fan, and I know through conversations with you in the past that you're a huge New York Mets fan. When did that fandom start to evolve? Really, really, really young. I was a Mets fan, forever. And I think it, just evolved from being the Mets to me were like the Long Island, like poor construction worker, like family, blue collar team. There was the Yankees who seemed, I don't know, I'm this is just in my head. I'm trying to think a lot of people feel that way. The Yankees were stars. They were playing in the Bronx. They had the beautiful stadium. They were winning games. They were, champions. They had the Mickey Mantles and all those, amazing people. The Mets were just this terrible stadium out in Flushing, Long Island, Shea Stadium at the time. And I just loved it. I mean, I would go to games, sit in terrible seats. This is back when you could bring in, transistor radios with batteries in them. And then if Pete Rose got into a fight with Bud Harrelson, they were throwing battery, the shit they would be able to throw on the field back then. You look at some of these old games and stuff when, there's a controversial call or something. It's incredible how much stuff is being thrown on the field. You have, something can kill a guy. Oh, yeah.
And it was just a different time. Like in 1986, when the Mets were in the World Series, they actually had a guy parachute into the stadium. I don't know if you remember that. You were probably too young to remember. They had a guy parachute into that's when you were able to fly a plane, a low flying plane over the stadium. So much has changed since then, but it was a wild time. I mean, I feel like the teams were full of characters back then. You look at 70s baseball, I just think those guys have been rooted out, whether it be by Twitter or all these things. I mean, I think like characters in sports were almost encouraged back then. You wanted the Jack Lamberts and these crazy people who were playing sports. These days, if Jack Lambert, I'm switching around from baseball to football, but if you had a guy like that, he'd be fined and kicked out of football. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And now this guy lets out a little air from a football, whether he did or he didn't. And it's a huge I'm like, come on, give me a break. The things that were going on back in, I don't know. I long more for the days of those type of crazy people. I mean, Doc Ellis, they say, pitched a no hitter on LSD and things like that.
Right.
It's just a crazier, wild time, and I feel like the Mets were that for me. They were just this ragtag team of scrap heap players that eventually became who they are.
we had that their Double A team was here in Jackson, Mississippi, and I got to see a lot of the guys coming up, the Greg Jeffries, the Strawberries, the Dykstras coming through, and you're right, it was definitely a cast of characters around that time, and I mean,
it's amazing. I mean, there's a book called The Good Guys Won, or The Bad Guys Won, I believe. It's a book about the 1986 New York Mets. And it's incredible. It's incredible. Actually, Darryl Strawberry was on our show on Chelsea Lately one time, and he told a story about how they would have sex with girls in between innings. They had like a little room behind the home run fence. They would look into the stands, find girls, have somebody go get that girl. Like, it's like a Van Halen concert.
Yeah.
And they would go have these girls brought back to like the, behind the home run fence or wherever, and, have sex in between innings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So just like wild stuff like that. I don't think could even, you can't even do that stuff these days. And maybe that's good. Maybe it's bad. Who knows? But I mean, I just grew up in a different era. So, that's just what I know.
Well, the big bad boy now, I guess, would be like, Johnny Manziel. He's always getting in trouble for alcohol and drugs. But I mean, gosh, on TMC the other day, Lenny Dykstra talking about being a gigolo, It's
yeah.
Just,
I know. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. And just like the cocaine and stuff. But I mean, Johnny Manziel these guys at least, continued to play.
Right.
They were able to somehow get up in the, you look back on some of these, you see guys, there's Keith Hernandez is famously smoking in the dugout in some of the clips from the 1986 World Series. So it's just wild.
What was it like being in New York during that 86 World Series?
It was incredible. I mean, it was, there was no internet, there was no anything. I remember coming back. I was working, like I said, as an electrician in New York City, I think at the time, maybe, yeah. Anyway, somehow I was on the Long Island Railroad heading from New York City back to Long Island. And the Mets were playing the Houston Astros in the playoffs. And it was an amazing game where I think both pitchers, Dwight Gooden and, I forget who it was. I forget his name, Mike Scott. I believe it was Mike Scott. They both pitched to like the 10th inning, which once again is unheard of these days. Both starters pitched like the 10th. It was like 1-0. And the game went to 18 innings. It was an incredible game. I think Lenny Dykstra wound up hitting a game-winning home run. And there was just like one guy on the train with a transistor radio, like calling the game out to everybody else. He'd be listening, and that was just the time we were in. There was no internet. One guy had a battery-operated transistor radio, and he's yelling out, "Bases loaded, da-da-da-da." And the whole city was into it. That's what I love about sports to this day. Like, the whole city, if your team's good, the whole city gets behind it, and it's great. It's almost a very communal kind of cool thing to have. Like look what just happened in Cleveland. I mean, that's amazing that city, as downtrodden as Cleveland could be, I guess, they rode that thing to, almost like their city's back now in a weird way. Like real estate prices have gone up in the city because of it and things like that. So it does matter in a weird way.
I was in Chicago when the Cubs made the 2003 playoff run, and it was probably more fun to be out there on Sheffield or Waveland than it was to be in the stadium. I mean, it was just insane.
I say that, first of all, I love Chicago, and I love Wrigley Field, and I tell it to everybody all the time, like, just go to Wrigleyville. Like, that, you don't even have to go into the stadium. Outside is more of a party than it's just great, especially this year. I mean, they're unbelievable. So I would imagine it's better than ever. But yeah, I mean, just the Cubby Bear and all those places. I mean, it's a blast. And good sports cities are, so much fun. And, having a team like the New England Patriots, those people are so lucky coming from a guy who's rooted for the Mets and the Jets and, just teams that are just not good consistently. Like to have a consistently good team like the New England Patriots or some of these cities that have like consistently great teams. Wow, it's a blessing because it's so hard to repeat or be good year after year after year after year. Getting a great quarterback like some of these franchise we've just never had that with the Jets. We've never had like that quarterback that just took us for 15 years of playoffs or got us close enough. looking at some of those guys, like, damn, why didn't we have, whoever, Troy Aikmans and some of these guys.
Oh yeah,
Tom Brady.
It's crazy how certain franchises seem to be snake bitten. I mean, Cleveland, the Browns, that's another example, of a team that they're always picking near the top, but they never seem to be able to find that quarterback.
No, that's why I'm saying, like, it's such. I mean, the Tom Brady should be selling all of them. Not just Tom Brady. Some of the, like, to have a continuously great quarterback season after season after season is especially picked. And Tom Brady certainly wasn't the top. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And those cities should be like, wow. I mean, because it's so easy for it to go the opposite direction. It's not often you get a Peyton Manning.
One thing that's different about New York is the I guess the skyline there. And in a lot of cities, after they win, they throw the parades. But it seems like it would be a little different for like a ticker tape parade in New York than it would be a lot of other places.
Oh, it's amazing. I went 86 when the Mets won. Which the other thing was great. Dwight Gooden, who had pitched, had an amazing series both in the playoffs and the World Series, didn't even show up because he got so coked out the night before that he was somehow slept through the ticker tape parade, which is weird now because now I think even back then they didn't even have ticker tape anymore. That was something that was, they were just throwing confetti out the windows. But I guess at one point they actually had ticker tape, which is from whatever I guess those old Wall Street machines actually made ticker tape. But it's crazy because, once again, it's just the entire city is on board. Whether you're a sports fan or not, you do kind of get, and I love, like, just watching, even if I don't have a dog in the fight, I'll watching fall baseball to me is just my favorite thing in the world. Watching people kind of getting bundled up in the stands if you're playing in Chicago or one of the cities that have, get a little cooler in October. It's just my favorite thing. I love it. I love all postseason sports. I love postseason football, baseball, basketball. I love it. Even if I'm not into the team, I like, as they used to say on the Wide World of Sports, the human drama of athletic competition. That's what I love.
Well, in 2000, the Mets returned to the World Series and took on the Yankees. What was that whole experience like for you?
Weirdly, as we were all so excited about a Subway Series, but it was an odd Met team. They weren't the 86 team. It was a kind of, a team that was put together and they somehow, Ray Ordonez, it was nobody that we loved as the way we loved the 86 guys, or even last year's team, who we loved going on. But yeah, so they were a weird team. Todd Zeal. It was just an odd. So yeah, and then they got killed. I think they won one game, and so the Yankees, it was 5 games, and the Yankees won 4, and that was over. So yeah, it wasn't as exciting as I would have hoped a Subway Series would have been. I wish it would have went 7 games and blah, blah, blah. But I do remember Who Let the Dogs Out they'd play every 3 seconds, anytime anybody did anything. So, yeah, so it was a pretty wild time, but not as great as I would have. It goes to one play. I think it was Todd Zeal hit a ball that Timo Perez, see, these are guys you don't even know. When Timo Perez was on, thought it was a home run. He stopped running around second base, got tagged out because it wasn't a home run, and that was it. I was like, the Mets just lost the World Series on that stupid play. If he would have scored or, whatever, it would have been a whole different series. So,
well, of course, and then you mentioned last year, the Mets, they seemed kind of like they were stacked last year. It kind of seemed like once they got, past the Cubs that they were going to be a force to be reckoned with. I know they didn't come away with the win, but was it still great to see them back in the World Series?
It was. It was because I don't think we expected it. I think once we got Cespedes at mid-season, it just became the ride was fun, and we had these amazing pitchers, and it looked good. But when you don't see a team every day like the Royals, you hear, oh, they're good, they look good, and they're getting, into the playoffs. And then once you see, like, oh, man, they're real good. Like, they are making everything happen. And it was just their year. Sometimes you watch a team where, like, there's no beating them. They're just going to do everything right. Every player's having, an absolutely amazing series. Even the guys who, are not great are great this week. And those are the teams that win. You know, whoever goes in the hottest, especially in baseball, they usually can ride that for the 2 weeks that the playoffs and the World Series last. And you've seen it time and time again.
As you've kind of ascended up the comedy world, have you had the opportunity to meet any of these players for the Mets?
Yeah, which is always kind of, because now a lot of the times these guys, I've met Keith Hernandez, I've met Ron Darling, I've met Lenny Dykstra, Darryl Gooden. Yeah, so they're basically just older guys who are just trying to. I guess looking back, it's weird, I mean, it's something for them that happened 30 years ago. For me, I'm sure they're pretty excited about it. The Mets just had a big reunion of the '86 team, but it's so in some ways they're probably like, yeah, it was glory days, and some people don't really like to celebrate glory days, I guess. I don't know. They've always, every time I've met them, they've always seemed a little like, yeah, great. You tell them the stories. In '86, I was here and I was there. I guess they hear that every day. So like, fantastic. You know what I mean?
And, well, you would think that, at one point in their life they had all this attention and then they don't have it as much. You would think, at least what I've been able to gather through doing podcasting and interviews, is the ones that are retired are the ones that are more likely to open up and let loose and be excited to talk about it because they're not in that spotlight anymore. So you would think they would enjoy getting the attention. Yeah.
I mean, in some cases, I'm sure some of them do, but for the most part, it's always been kind of like I mean, how much more can I talk about 1986? That's what but maybe it's just me, getting that from them, but who knows?
Go to Chicago and try to talk about anything other than the '85 Bears and see what happens.
Oh, yeah, I remember it well. There's actually a guy who runs, great guy who runs the Zanies in Chicago, the comedy club in Chicago. Rick Geyser, super nice guy. And he is obsessed, collects every single athlete who has made a record. So, and there's many. You think it's only that Super Bowl shuffle or whatever the '85 Bears did. But it's crazy how many athletes along the way have made music, records, not only bad rap albums by basketball players, but in the 50s and the 40s. So this guy's obsessed with it. And as he drives you around to like morning radio and stuff, as you promote your shows, he'll tell you all about, these crazy songs that they did. The most popular one, chart-wise, I believe, was that Super Bowl Shuffle by the '85 Chicago Bears, yeah. Is that what it was called, Super Bowl Shuffle?
Super Bowl Shuffle. And then right. I remember Shaq, he had a run there where he
Shaq had a terrible, did some rap albums. A lot of those guys did some bad rap albums. And then, tons of people. You'd be surprised how many people have cut records. Back in those days, in like the 50s and 60s, they were like, oh, sure, you're a famous athlete. Why not make an album? And they all have them.
That's a genre I've really never thought about exploring, but that's very intriguing.
Well, if you ever choose to, you talk to Rick Geyser at Zanies in Chicago. He is a wealth of information. You should actually have him on your podcast one time. He's fascinating.
He definitely sounds like it. Well, growing up on Long Island, is it safe to say that you're, I mean, you've already said you're a Mets, Jets, Islanders fan. But do you pull for the other New York teams as well?
I do now that I'm in Los Angeles. I've been living in Los Angeles for quite some time now. So yes, I love the Yankees. I do. I loved watching the Yankees. If the Mets are out, I'm all about the New York team. And I love the Jeter years. I love the Tito Martinez and all those, they were great times. So I've now become more of a baseball fan overall. I love watching a good team. I became a Dodger fan. I love watching the Dodgers play well. And, so yeah, and because we didn't up until now, we have a team now. We hadn't had a football team for a long time here in Los Angeles. I would get up on Sunday and, we had every game on. So I never really rooted for an LA team. So I would kind of get into the Broncos and I would get into all these teams. So yeah, just watching at this point, I like watching a good game. I'd rather see a game be 28-28 with 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter than watch some team that I'm into winning 42-7,
I found that when you move away, that it's easier to root for the local, because when you're in the local vicinity and you have to listen to all the opposing fans all the time, it just gets to be overkill. But when you go away and are not with that, it's a little easier to root for those teams that you might have grew up despising.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I never really had I loved Reggie Jackson once again, like that, going back to like characters of the game. I loved even the Yankees back then in '77 with Billy Martin and all those crazy times. So, I was always into like the show business of teams, and those guys, the Yankees and some of they were just like a good show business team. There were, a lot of, so yeah, I've always been into the sport more than in individual teams, except for the Mets and the Jets.
What do you think about the Rams moving back to LA? Are you going to follow them? Go out and check out some games?
Yeah, well, they're playing in a Coliseum for the first couple of seasons, and until I moved into this new stadium in the building. And I've been to the Coliseum many times. It's not great. It's in kind of a terrible area. It's terrible to park. So these are the things I think about now as an adult. You're like, you weigh all these options first. Like, I'd rather watch on. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting. I never loved the Rams anyway, even when they were in St. Louis. So who knows? Yeah, sure. I'm actually going to, I believe they opened the season, or the second game, first or second game of the season, is against the Seattle Seahawks, and I have a friend on Seahawks. So I'm going to, I believe it's the first Rams game here against the Seahawks, and I'll be there. I think it's September 11th or something.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was looking at the schedule. There's a guy from Southern Miss that just got drafted by the Rams, a guy named Mike Thomas, he made a ridiculous, this guy is amazing, and he definitely was a steal in the 6th round, but he made a ridiculous one-handed, 1 foot in touchdown catch that was, it was SportsCenter top plays, so I think he's gonna get a lot of fans out there in Los Angeles.
Now, was he wearing the gloves or was he not wearing the gloves? Because I love when the 70s receivers, like the Lynn Swans and all of that, they say that, these guys would never make these catches without the gloves. Like that one that the guy on the New York Giants made, that amazing catch he made a couple of years ago. And I kind of agree. I don't know if you'll put on those sticky receiver gloves, but they do. There's no way some of these catches would have been made without those receiver gloves.
Well, then at the same time, sometimes back in the day, those guys would have stick 'em on their hands. So. Who was that one player who used to be covered in it? I forget who it was. It was one guy who played for the Redskins, I think. And that stuff, I don't know if you ever touched that stick 'em stuff. It was crazy sticky. So, yeah, maybe that did help as well. Yeah, so I'm going to that Rams game because of John Ryan, who's getting married to a comedian friend of mine, Sarah Colonna. Actually, next week in Cabo, I'll be at the wedding. So that's pretty exciting, and he's kind of a great guy, and so I'll be at the Seahawks Rams game. See how that all goes. He's a fun Twitter follow. He's a very charismatic guy for a punter.
Great guy. Actually, that's how he kind of met Sarah. He's like a huge fan of comedy, so he was into like watching Chelsea Layton and comedians and stuff. So he's a really funny, kind of a great guy, and more than just a punter. He saved that team countless amounts of times with that huge pass that he had a couple of years ago in the playoffs. And he's a great guy. And it's amazing. I've performed up in Seattle a few times, and he's come to my shows and taken me out afterwards. And this guy is just he's a punter, first of all. But in Seattle, he is a rock star. Like, you can't go anywhere without freaking out over him because he kind of stands out. And so it's wild. It's wild to see how people just go nuts for him. Good guy.
Well, speaking of Chelsea, how did you get mixed up with Chelsea Handler?
Oh man, we've been friends forever. So just doing stand up, that we met, just on the open mic scene and whatever it was out here in LA. She was a kid. She's, a couple of years younger than me. So she was just starting. I had been in it a little bit, and we met. God, it's kind of like when she first got to LA. She was 19 years old, and she was just starting out doing comedy here. We met. She was probably in LA for a week when we met, and she's been, a great friend of mine ever since. We've been really good friends, and she's been real good to me. As she's been successful. She's always taken me along for the ride, which I've, always appreciated.
What was it like when, her show starts picking up steam? did you start to get more and more recognized out in public? Did you start to reap any of the benefits from the newfound fame?
Oh man, did I ever? Nobody. I often say, like, nobody took more advantage of that than I did. I mean, I was having the time of my life. I've slowed down quite a bit since, but man, I was on the road doing what people do when girls recognize them and things like that. Yeah, I was having a wild time. But yeah, it was amazing. We started out as this little tiny show that this was kind of a goof, and it started to become just great. And we loved it. All of us were very down to earth. All the comedians who were on that show were very down to earth. So it never, like, getting recognized and stuff like that, it's cool, but I'm glad people are watching. It never bothered me. It's still, people always come up to me now, and I think it's great. I'm just happy that people like it. So, yeah, being recognized is fun, but it is what it is. I'm okay with it.
This is a sports podcast, and we can venture off into different areas, but there weren't too many athletes that came on the show. One of the ones that actually did come on Chelsea's show was Drew Brees.
Drew Brees came on. Yes, it was great. We were all very excited because he is Drew Brees. So Drew Brees comes on the show. We tell Chelsea, but she barely knows who Drew Brees is. We have to kind of prep her a little bit before she goes out to the interview. We say that he is I forget how many times he's been in the Pro Bowl, but we tell Chelsea, he's an 8-time Pro Bowler. She thinks we mean Pro Bowler. Which I never even put that together, but I'm like, of course you would think that if you don't know anything about sports. You would say Pro Bowler, she thinks he's a bowler. So she goes out and says to him, so you're a really good bowler. And poor Drew Brees is like, oh, I guess. He's completely he's a little nervous as it is. He's an athlete. He's not, not much of a, interview kind of guy in front of a live studio audience. So the whole time she's interviewing him, she thinks he's a bowler, a pro bowler. And until the very end of the interview where she realizes he somehow says he's a football player. So yeah, that's why we never had athletes on, because Chelsea thought that Drew Brees was a pro bowler.
Well, I mean, if you see him standing up next to other players, I see how that could be easy to assume such.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Drew, and the weird thing was he was in like just like a sport jacket and regular. So he looks like a very unassuming kind of, looks like an insurance salesman sometimes with, without all the gear on. So yeah, he could definitely be a pro bowler.
You had you were on that show more than just about anybody else other than Chelsea and Chewy.
I think in the end I was besides Chelsea and Chewy, I made more appearances just for many different reasons. Not only on the round table, I was doing all sorts of characters on the show, and to the point where at the end, as we got toward the end of the show, I was, Chelsea she would be like, whatever you guys want to do, just do. And I would come up every day. I would come up with ridiculous things to do on the show. And she'd be like, if you want to do it, go ahead. So, she gave us the freedom to do kind of whatever we wanted, and it was great. And I took full advantage of that as well. I was out there quite a bit doing things. So, yeah, we had a lot of fun. It was a good time.
That, I think, led to other opportunities, and you got to host Anarchy Afterwards, which was the post show for Sons of Anarchy.
Sons of Anarchy after show, yes. That was an interesting time for me. On FX Live, following immediately after Sons of Anarchy, which at that point was their biggest show. People, had fanatical fans. And I didn't know the show as well as I probably should have, to be, I guess, perceived as an expert because I was hosting the show. But I got the job kind of really last minute. I have some friends who work on, actually Kurt Sutter, who created the show, is a friend of mine. And it was kind of a last minute thing where he called me and said, can you come over and do this? I'm like literally last minute. It was going to go live, and I was shooting Chelsea Lately across the street. And he said, how quickly can you get over here and host this live show after Sons of Anarchy? And I said, yeah, I'll do it. No problem. I knew the show a little bit, but not in depth. And I realized later on that people, they were fanatical fans about every episode. I guess how people are about Game of Thrones and things like that. So it became more and more obvious that I had no idea what I was talking about as as the seasons progressed, and people had no problem with telling me on Twitter that I'm an asshole. People hated me on that show. It was almost kind of like laughable, the hate mail I would get after one of those aired. It was a lot of fun. I did enjoy doing it, and the people over at Sons of Anarchy are wonderful. But after it was over, I would get so much hate mail. It was like, fuck, this is tough. This is hard. But it was fun. It was a fun couple of seasons I did that. It was a good time. It was a little something different than Chelsea Lately. But I would run literally from Chelsea Lately. We would finish taping that, and I would run like across the street and go right to taping another thing. So it was kind of a crazy time where I was just like, my head was spinning. But yeah.
Well, you're kind of helping out here and there on her new Netflix shows, but do you kind of miss the everyday grind of being in on the show?
Oh yeah. I loved daily TV. It was like working on a late night show, any one of them. I have a lot of friends who work on all late night shows. It's so much fun to be on a show that basically what you write that day will be on the air that night. You don't find that very often in TV writing or anything really. So to kind of have instant gratification is great. So yeah, I love the daily grind of every daily writing.
Well, and you still found time here and there, and of course now you've been out blowing up the road. I mean, for somebody that doesn't know, what's life like on the road as a comic?
Oh, it's I think it comes down to, I mean, you've done a little road as well, so you know, but I think if you don't have like a family or a wife or anything, which I don't. So I know my friends who do, the road can be a bit of a grind. You're away from your family, and that's not great. But it's amazing. I still love it. I really do. And I even love playing, some of the real shitholes that I've played. You're out there. I mean, ultimately, I actually just went on the road this weekend with a guy who's relatively new to comedy. And I was like, ultimately, you're making a living doing comedy, which is so many people want to do. And if you have the ability or whatever to do it, it's a blessing. So for me to bitch about certain things, and I do, quietly, sometimes, but man, it's great. I get to see some cities I probably would have never seen. I get to see every city. I'm going this year. I'm going on a tour of all over Vietnam and Thailand and Asia and the Philippines, and I'm doing some crazy stuff. So yeah, I mean, I've performed in Australia and Tokyo and all over this country, and it's incredible. It really is. I love it. I love it from the smallest shithole bars to the biggest. I played in front of 20,000 people at Chelsea, so I've done it all, and it's all been great. It's a great time. It's wild. You can have fun doing it. You can make it miserable. Your choice, really.
What's next for Chris Franjola?
I've shot some pilots. I'm doing some stuff. I'm working on some other things with some comedians who you probably know. But, you never know in this town. So I don't really talk too much about these things because most of it goes in the shitter. But, so we'll see. I got some good things coming up. But right now it's the road. I got, some stuff this summer. I mean, the summer's a little quiet time for us comedians. But then in the fall, I'm back doing some big things. So, yeah, then I got, I guess, next couple of things. I'm in San Diego and a few other places where I'm performing. La Jolla Comedy Store in August. And then September, Scottsdale, Stand Up Scottsdale. And Comedy Connection in Rhode Island. So if any of those places are in your neighborhood, come out. Because like we said earlier, my show is fun. It
is, and you've also got an album out, the Shallow End.
Yeah, Shallow End. Yeah, I forget about the album sometimes because the thing with a comedian, you put your album out, and these days you just put them out so they can get in like the Pandora shuffle and things like that, and it's fun. But once you release your album or your special or anything like that, as a comedian, you're constantly evolving and changing your material and stuff. So you almost look at it going, I don't do that anymore that way. I love my album. It's fun. It's good. But, you change a week later after I did it, there are things I would have changed on it. So sometimes I listen to it going, I wish I would have said this, would have said that. But, what are you going to do?
It's always great. It's always going to be a work in progress. And jokes sometimes are like fruit. They have a shelf life.
That's it.
As far as when they work and when they don't. But to me, the album's amazing. So if anybody's out there, go on iTunes, go on Amazon, wherever else, get that album. It's good stuff.
Well, go on YouTube. It's on YouTube for free. At this point, I've made the money I'm going to make. I don't care as long as people listen to it. I don't. However you get it. Nobody makes any money off the albums anymore. So at this point, just listen and come to my live shows.
It sounds like a plan. Well, Chris, thanks for coming on the show, man. Really enjoyed it, and keep in touch, man. Hope to see you soon.
Oh yeah, definitely. I have to come back out and do your shows one of these days. I would love it.
That was Chris Franjola, the first comedian on Airing It Out. You can't count me, because if you've ever seen me live, you know that I shouldn't count as a comedian. What a great guy, man. Really enjoyed talking to Chris. If you have the chance to see him live, go check him out. You can check out his website, chrisfranjola.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Chris Franjola. You can follow me at Jamie_Arrington. Or you can follow this podcast at Airing It Out, at ARRINGITOUT. You can also find us on Facebook as well, Jamie Arrington Comedy, as well as Airing It Out. My next comedy show will be Thursday, July the 28th, at the Sanger Theater in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Laughs for Life presents Frank Caliendo. Tickets are going fast. If you don't have your tickets, you need to get on that right now. They're going very fast. $50. Laughs, the number 4, life.com. Laughsforlife.com. Be sure. It's going to be an amazing night for comedy in the Hub City. It's going to be a lot of fun. Always a great time at the Sanger Theater. And the VIP tickets are already sold out. So if you were hoping to get a VIP ticket, you missed out. Again, 728-16 Frank Caliendo at the Sanger Theater in Hattiesburg. Special thanks to everybody who's been sharing our episodes, who's gone to iTunes and given us a rating or given us a review. Really appreciate all the help spreading the word. We're still in our first few episodes, trying to get the word out, trying to build a following. It's going to take some time. The podcast world is getting more and more crowded every day, so we're trying to have episodes that are interesting with interesting people to bring to you guys. Next week, gonna have another great show. I don't know what to tell you. You're gonna have to wait and see who it is. I don't announce who it is until I record the episode and get it ready to go, because you never know what's gonna happen, as I've found out the past few weeks. So anyways, gonna be a great time. Keep up with us. If you have any feedback, shoot me an email, jamie@jamiearrington.net. That's JAMIE, not JAIME, or however else you think you can spell it. Thanks again to Chris Franjola. You guys check out Chris Franjola. Follow us on social media. Come right back to us for another episode of Airing It Out next week.